Hey everyone, how's it going? This video I wanted to talk about how people function and how this ties into morality and empathy and everything else. Humanity's gotten to the point in its history where we can have factories that mass produce anything we want. Peanut butter, any kind of food, computers, desks, beds, everything that you see around you has been mass produced. This is good to the extent that it makes our lives comfortable, but it's bad to the extent that it really takes us away from what it actually means to survive in a world without this net, without this bureaucracy, without this, without specialization in trade and everything else that we've developed over thousands of years. I'm not saying any of that's a bad thing, but what I am saying is that we oftentimes forget, and I think it's important that each person growing up in this society realizes how easily and how close we actually are to being to where we were 2,000 years ago, where we had to handcraft and produce everything that we had in our possession. I think oftentimes people overlook this in the food industry. And this is where organizations like PETA come in, and this is where people's heartstrings get tugged on. People eat meat, people eat food products on a daily basis and don't even think about it. People eat living things that at some point have to be killed, at some point have to be alive. And the logic is, in the moment, it's pretty easy to detach yourself when you're not, physically reminded of what that aliveness means. For example, you eat some pork and a vegetarian comes up to you at your dinner table and says, that pork was once a living cow. It had to go and be factory farmed. It probably lived a miserable existence, treated like crap. And you can tell them all these things and they're not going to give a crap. They're at a Chinese restaurant and they're trying to enjoy the food. But the element kind of changes when you realize what it actually would mean if that person had to kill the cow themselves. And it's very doubtful that people would be able to do this. Often what we used to do is we used to hunt and gather, right? We would hunt for these animals. Hunting was almost a societal game of sorts. We would communicate in groups and try and track down and hunt an animal to survive. This made sense. Now, however, it's a much different system. We've domesticated animals, we factory farm them, we take their meat, we eat their flesh, and then the consumers don't even really think about it. And those that do, some of them are pretentious assholes that try to make their point verbally, and that very rarely works. But what I wanted to talk about in this video was this phenomenon on YouTube. You type in how to kill domesticated farm animal, any kind you want, humanely, and it'll pull up a video and show you the killing of that animal. Now, the reason I got curious for looking this up was I started to ask myself, and I started making these arguments when people would bring up this topic as to whether or not I feel comfortable eating meat. And then I started thinking in terms of, could I actually take the animal which I eat from and do the deed myself? So from this, I went on YouTube, typed in how to kill an animal humanely, because I'm at some point in my life, I'd like to be able to sustain myself. I'd like to be able to have my own chickens, have my own garden, things of that nature. It's kind of the solace to myself that I can survive on my own. And what's surprising to me is that even on videos where the people do it quickly and as painlessly as possible, you still have majority downvotes or a huge sizable amount of downvotes, and you have commenters saying, "How could you do that? You're cruel, man." And it's really interesting to kind of see the human nature in these comments, because you have people who understand the emotional and human quandary of this killing of another animal for your own sustenance, and it has to be done humanely and with keeping in mind that you have to use every part of it with meaning, because if you killing something makes it much more personal. And I feel like the reason people are depressed, the reason people are all these other things where they feel numb to everything, is because they don't really understand what it takes to make the things that are around us anymore. And that's a problem. So what's happened is our biology has not been able to catch up with the progress that we've made as a social species. And that's a huge issue. I have personally made the commitment to not eat something I couldn't kill myself, and I have personally never killed a chicken. I have never killed a fish, but those are the only two kinds of meat that I feel like I could kill. I have caught fish before, and I know what that's like. Fish are fish, you know. There's nothing really as relatable to fish. They live in the water. Their makeup is much different than ours. But when you look at animals like pigs, which are pretty closely related to us, much more closely related than you might think, and cows and things like that, that's where people start to become, these things have sentience, they have feeling, they have all these other things. So, I kind of wanted to talk about these people on these videos who downvote and comment and call the person who's doing the humane killing and trying to show people how to do it quickly and painlessly, just the hypocrisy. Because these people will call this person a demon and everything else and a horrible monster, but then they'll turn around and consume things that they're not even aware of where they came from. And that's where this issue comes in, this relationship we have with each other in society, where we're not emotionally aware of the ramifications of what's going on. And this is something that many activists have brought up before, and this is... And honestly, if you ask any person who is an avid meat eater, who a vegetarian comes up to and says, "Oh, I eat steak every night," and everything else, if that person can say with confidence that they killed their meat and they hunt themselves, then by all means, good for them. But for people who haven't considered this and just feel emotionally sad for these animals that are killed, you need to ask yourself this question, because you need to be aware of this cognitive dissonance and this irony that's in your head.